Hello and welcome to Talk Spooky to Me, the Ghost Story Guys mail show. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestel.
And this is our opportunity to hear from you, our listeners. Although on this episode, in fact, also we have a guest. So we won't be doing email this time, but we will next time, we promise. Until then, my friend, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. I wasn't abducted at the weekend.
Even though perhaps you wish you could have been, given your experience of Hull.
The conference was brilliant.
Yes, the conference was amazing.
Yes.
Finn.
And the hotel bed was nice. It was comfortable. And we came home early after the conference because there was nothing else to do. But I got to meet Whitley Strieber in person, which will stay with me the rest of my life. So,
absolutely, that's cool as hell. On this episode, we have two very cool guests. We just finished the conversation, and honestly, we had to let them go because we could have talked at them all goddamn day. Go. I know. We talked another 10 minutes after recording finished, and I was like, oh, geez, I feel, we should probably let them go and eat. But yeah, great people. John Adams and Toby Poser, of course, of filmmaking family, the Adams family, and they have directed the film Hellhole, which is now streaming on Shudder. So we have a great conversation about that, with them rather, about shooting in Serbia, Serbian legends. Of course, this was why we did the Haunting of Serbia episode, because we knew we would be having John and Toby on. And I got to tell you, Paul, I think all that research and all that Serbian sort of immersion we did really paid off dividends, because I think we learned some very cool stuff in the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a very wide-ranging conversation with a few strange detours along the way.
Yes, as our best conversations do.
Always.
Just before we get started, though, I will tell you a quick story of something kind of amusing that happened to me. So obviously, I'm back in Victoria for a little bit yet, and I was wandering around looking for research materials in vintage shops. And I ended up talking to this one fella. You know how sometimes you meet someone and you think, oh, this person's walked a similar path to me? Then it just gets ridiculous. Well, that's what happened, because I'm in this vintage shop. It was Friday the 13th. And of course, the Vic Cinema was playing Friday the 13th that night. So we got talking about that. That led to, I'm not kidding, about a 40-minute conversation about horror films. And then it turns out that this gentleman had lived in London, Ontario. Not only that, he lived 2 blocks away from where I live right now in London. I have met an alarming number of people who've moved to Ontario and then back here. So again, I'm hoping to buck that part of that particular part of the story. But I suppose you can't fight. You just got to let the river take you. So we will see where the river takes me. Last night, it took me to a bar where I was tasting some whiskeys. And one of them, I was trying to explain to the bartender that the whiskey tasted like the theme song to the sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati sounds. Yeah, it's then I learned that A, not everyone's old enough to remember WKRP in Cincinnati, and B, not everyone knows what synesthesia is.
I have no idea of that program.
You don't?
No.
Oh, well, all right. Well, guys, we are going to throw to our conversation with John and Toby, and then Paul and I are going to have to sit down with some DVDs and a case of beer, because we got to get his education up. Welcome back. As we said before the break, we have guests on this episode. We are very excited to be welcoming filmmakers John Adams and Toby Poser, who you really don't need an introduction for. I mean, you've seen Hellbender, you've seen The Deeper You Dig, you've seen Where the Devil Roams, and now hopefully you've seen Hellhole, available on Shudder. John, Toby, welcome to the Ghost Story Guys.
Hey, Brennan and Paul, thanks for having us on.
Super nice, you guys. Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I say we talked a couple of years ago. We had a conversation just after Hellbender came out, and it was fascinating where that was sort of the end of, and we were talking about at the time how it was the end of one particular era of filmmaking for you guys, and you weren't quite sure where the road would lead next. And it has been just so thrilling to see how the scope of your work has expanded and how you've just kind of really become part of the larger horror community. Very, very cool stuff.
Oh, that's so cool.
Thank you.
It's so great. Yeah, that was a moment, right?
So let's just dive right into Hellhole. This was really, I say unexpected. We're mutuals with Justin Martell on Instagram, and I saw he posted I believe a photo of you guys over in Serbia, and I thought, oh shit, well that is really, really exciting. And I'm kind of curious, how did that come about? How did you folks end up over there?
Well, we had the good fortune to, Justin and Matt invited us on to Last Drive-In, the Joe Bob Briggs, and we had the tremendous pleasure of doing that when they presented Hellhole. And so when we were on the
Hellbender.
show, I mean, Hellbender. At least I'm.
Soon we'll start, change. Something won't be hellish. It'll be more like. I don't know.
It's a good theme. Roll with it.
We just like hell. What can we say? Keep going. Try to interrupt you.
Hellbender. Yeah, we were on the show presenting that, and they asked if we had anything cooking, and this idea about a fracking camp and secrets in the dirt bubbled up. And next thing you know, we were kind of working on the script and on our way to Serbia.
Very cool. And the script, if I'm not mistaken, the script actually started as a Canadian set story in sort of the camps of northern Alberta.
Yeah, we were driving to Alaska, and we had just dropped off. Toby, Zelda, and me were driving from Montana to Alaska through Canada. And Toby had to stay in Calgary, and Zelda and I kept going. So we drove through the fracking camps. And, it was wild because we were like, man, look at all these like man camps way out in the middle of nowhere. This would be a great place for terrible things to happen. And so we just started, we had hours and hours and hours to talk about terrible things happening. And that's where this story was born.
Years ago, I was hitchhiking through the interior of BC, and I was picked up by a guy who worked as a tree planter up there, because those companies sort of have this obligation, or had at the time, this is almost 20 years ago now, to remediate by planting trees. But he said that it was bleak because you were just planting trees in muck. He said, there's no way these things are going to grow. This is a mixture of mud, oil, and garbage. And it sounded so very bleak. And again, the perfect kind of ground from which a story of body horror would spring.
It was perfect, and it was a lot of fun to put it together. And then when Justin and Matt said, well, let's do this movie, we got Lulu, our oldest daughter, who always works with us, to write the first draft. And in a way, that's really where, like, in a sense, her first draft showed us where the comedy was in the whole thing. She showed us, like, she wrote this funny, it was very funny because she's wicked. Got a wicked sense of humor and outlook on life. And so what came across was, to us, very funny. So a lot of that stayed. And it changed the way it changed the way we had originally seen it.
I was thinking that as watching. I mean, your films are of course, always very enjoyable. But I mean, sort of the humor, I don't recall as much of it, maybe since like Knuckle Jack.
Oh,
something
great.
like that wasn't quite as, a little more serious. But this had a really great sense of humor to it.
The Serbians, the Serbians brought so much of that to it. When we got over there and worked on the translations with the Serbian team, it just added a whole new texture, which I think that lovable cast of roughnecks, the Serbians, just nailed.
And miscommunication is always funny, and and we could see the miscommunications. There was already humor in the script, but once we got there, all the miscommunications that were happening, a lot of things they said just got put right into the script, because it was just like, oh my God, it's so funny. Not only that we don't understand what's going on, they don't understand what's going on, and we're all going to go out and make a movie about a lot of people not understanding what's going on. So it was fun.
And Matt, the other American, who we've known since he was maybe 8 years old, is a really funny guy and a great comedian and really sharp sense of humor. And he just was so easy to work with and perfect for the role.
It's great to hear that, because Paul and I, in the lead up to this, our previous story episode was The Haunting of Serbia. We went and found a bunch of Serbian sort of ghost stories and legends and things like this. And a sense of humor was not something that bled through. So it's nice to know that was very different on the ground.
That's so great, because we always say, well, if we had ever been to Serbia, we would have not written a funny script, because there was a lot of not funny and very serious and a dark kind of, I call it like dark mysticism, because there was undertones of mystery and magic, but it seemed to swing dark. And that's no reflection of the people once you started talking to them, but the towns. It was really intense. So I'll bet you guys came up. What was your favorite tale? I'd love to hear one.
Geez. I mean, one of them was, it's hard to say if it's a ghost story or not, but it was a story we pulled out of Serbian Reddit. And as I understand it, he never mentioned where the village was, but it was a patch of woods he used to play in that was between two small villages. And one day they were playing, it was three of them, and one of them went missing. When they finally found him, he was in a bunker of some kind. So one of the kids had to sort of climb down into the fissure in the ground where he'd fallen in and boost him back out. But essentially, after they boosted him out, the story he told was that I was lured there by a man, which obviously, this is not a ghost story, this is just a bad story. But then the story changed. He said it was a voice. And supposedly when they developed that area, according to the storyteller, there was no bunker found. So that's where the weirdness kind of comes in there. I think, Paul, would you say the most Serbian one, aside from that, was the red thread?
Yeah, I was going to say that would probably be mine, which was a story about someone's grandmother sending a pigeon to protect them, which had got a red thread around it, and we weren't sure. We were talking about what possibly this red thread could symbolize, and then one of our listeners' family comes from Serbia, and so they've told us that it's classed as a kind of protection spell, that if you use red thread, it protects the people you love, which was quite interesting because you don't see that a lot in Western European sort of folklore. So it was good to get that kind of aspect to it because, as you guys have just said, Serbia's obviously had a very troubled recent past, and I think sometimes you can be overawed by it, but when you get there and you meet the people, you realise they've got a wonderful philosophy in regards to life, which I think some of us are quite surprised about when you think about how recently tragic their recent history's been.
Did you guys look into the vampire lore of Sava Savanovic?
No.
They've got a pretty cool vampire lore there that predates Dracula, and it's they're kind of proud of that, and it's very cool. And when we were shooting Hellhole, the scene at the lake, we had to drive through this region. I guess it's the Lower Carpathians that is known for this vampire lore, and it was impressive. The sort of shroud of something dark and mysterious there. That was pretty cool. So yeah, that's their claim.
And they had, things hung on their door too. That was the thing that kind of really brought it to home. It was like, oh, not only is this where this myth is from, but it's still believed. And so then you're like, are we staying here tonight, or are we driving 2 hours back to the other place? It was great. It was great. And that's why when we were asked, can you do this? Can you rewrite this for Serbia? The answer was yes, because what could be better than to go into, a different culture's environment and live with that culture and work with them? Because you're not a tourist anymore. Now you're sitting in there, eating food, going to bed, waking up, working together, dealing with whatever's, and you're all together. It's such a great way to meet, other cultures.
Yeah, no doubt. And thinking about the lake you're talking about, Toby, that has all of the countryside there in the film has such a unique vibe that I recall reading in interviews, you guys were originally considering shooting Serbia for Canada, but you decided very quickly that no, this is going to be a Serbian story. And I think it's the only way it could have been done, because seeing how the land had such a unique personality, I think it would be hard to pass it off as anything else, at least that far into the country, because I think that far into the country, you are dealing with the personality of the country itself.
Agreed.
Also, it was, their accents. Americans would think, is that a Canadian accent? Yeah, that's a Canadian accent. But everyone else in the world would know that was not a Canadian accent. Does that sound Canadian? Oh, kind of, but not.
Yeah, something that we didn't quite make clear either is the two scientists, the environmentalists, are Slovenian. I mean, they're played by Serbian actors, but they're speaking Slovenian. So the translations, everything are for Slovenian. And that's the thing I think we didn't quite make clear. So we have a lot, in a way, it was really cool because in a sense, it's sort of a cauldron of cultures and languages. And then you have these Americans come in essence, they're the aliens as well. I mean, they're coming in, they're invading a land which has a history of mercurial history geographically. So it kind of fit perfectly once we embraced the whole Serbian location. And not to mention that insane Soviet era site, with the helm and sickle up there. That has a rich history too, from like the 1950s.
And when we die from some kind of weird radiation poisoning and everyone wonders why we died so young, you guys mind just playing back the tape, this tape, and saying, maybe we should just go check the paint on that place's walls and the dirt. It's not that the curse of, who's that old vampire? It's just called lead, or
lead and uranium.
Character building.
Yeah, there you go.
It's very good. That was very character building.
I have to say that the idea of using a frozen Napoleonic soldier, I think, is inspired because not many films touch that particular period. I mean, obviously, you'll get historical dramas about it, but it seemed to me, as you were talking about sort of the aliens there, the fact that this all starts by uncovering another typical alien. Obviously, we know there's more to it than that. But obviously, that was, for me, just made me chuckle because I don't know why I found that idea so funny that there would be a frozen Napoleonic soldier hiding in the ground till somebody accidentally drills through his arse.
As always, we can blame the French, I think, is the takeaway here. Yeah.
We were really happy that... there's another criminal down below the window. We're in New York City. Normally we're up in the Catskills where we live, and it's absolutely silent. And here we are in New York to talk to you. But we were so Lulu had this great funny scene with the Frenchman, the Napoleonic soldier in the first draft, but then and that was supposed to be Canada, which would make sense that they were French,
Yes.
The Canadians. It was originally going to be a trapper, and then like a French trapper, which has rich history in Canada, of course. And then when it changed to Serbia, we were like, "Fuck!" So we did a little googling. My sense of history is shit, but fortunately, I learned that enough that we learned that Napoleon's soldiers had wandered into the Illyrian Peninsula, the Balkans. We were like, phew, because we really didn't want to get rid of that French scene, and then we just turned it into a French soldier.
Yeah, and Lulu, like we said, wrote the original script, and she speaks French, and so the original script was loaded with French stuff, and it was really funny to us. So it was very lucky that Napoleon made a mistake and tried to invade Serbia.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who. Well, let's not get into that. But it's like anything involves invading Eastern Europe, this seems like a real bad idea. It's
always a bad, it's one. And that's actually that you say that, like Belgrade and Serbia and that part of the world is kind of the gateway it's the gateway for the East to the West and the West to the East. And unfortunately, they suffer a lot of war through every generation of war. It goes back thousands of years of troops coming down, swinging, and they all swing through there and stop for lunch. And it's tough, and you can see it in history. Like in Toby went to this great old castle there in Belgrade, and you can just see the history of the different invasions, and then their culture, starting with the foundation, and then the next culture, and then
just through East. A stone wall.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating stuff, and it plays into so many things over there, and it's very interesting. The other thing that's really cool to feel and to watch and kind of to witness is that they're still, I would consider more Eastern facing, like more Russian facing rather than like American facing and so I think they're at a place in this history that we're talking about of making decisions about, well, which way do we want to face now? Yugoslavia obviously it was kind of a Russian satellite, but they were very successful. Yugoslavia was very successful in their kind of way, at least up until a certain point. And that's always interesting because, you're, especially coming from America, you're fed certain things. You have a certain viewpoint. You have a certain look at history. And you go over there and they will say, oh, well, you're seeing it all wrong and here's the way it is. And it's like, oh, well, it's great to hear. And then you have to take it and you got to decide how to weigh it.
Taking it back to the film itself, was it a big adjustment for you guys going from what is usually a pretty tight crew on your stuff to what I have to imagine was a significantly larger crew on the film?
Yeah, it was very big shift for us. Exciting, learned a lot. I think when we first got on, I was just so bewildered by the fact that there were trailers and people to lug things. You weren't supposed to touch things. I mean, we're used to kind of just doing all of that. A monitor. What the hell is a monitor?
Right.
People to light and doing the sound and shoot. Shoot the camera. Another American, Sean Dahlberg, and so it was pretty wild. But I think we learned so much, and John usually puts it a really nice way. Well, I won't eat your words, but you say something about like rules. And
I think very quickly we learned, because we grew up learning how to make films as a family, and that family was Toby, John, Lulu, and Zelda. And we learned everything together. And so there was no rules. It never started out with, here's the 180-degree rule of cinematography. Here's the rule of lighting. Here's this rule, that rule. We just shot, made mistakes. Sometimes they were mistakes that we love and we keep making because they're not mistakes anymore. There's something that we like. But either way, we have a modus operandi that we're very used to. Immediately we saw, a whole new set of rules. And so I think what we very quickly did was like, okay, we need to follow the rules of filmmaking. And because there's 60 people here that are all following those rules. And if we step out of line, there's going to be a mutiny on the pirate ship and we're going to be in trouble really fast. Like you don't want to be on a pirate ship with a lot of pirates, like especially angry pirates. So it was a lot of fun because we just saw basically saw what the rules were and figured out the best way we could put our DNA on this film within the limits of those rules. And so it was a great experience in that way. And then we got to come home back to America, and now we're making movies, knowing things that we never knew before. And so we can apply the things that we thought were effective. We can leave behind the things that we didn't think were effective. And so in that sense, it was a wonderful experience.
Was the experience similar when you went to shoot Plastic Smile, which is, of course, part of a series for Screambox, their Tales from the Void series?
So after Serbia, then we get this job to shoot Plastic Smile up in Canada. So we go up to Sault Ste. Marie. And now, though, we know the rules. And so it was great because there was no learning curve. We got to step right in and say, okay, this is the cinematographer. This is what the cinematographer does. So we knew immediately how to talk to Scott, who was genius, and the Plastic Smile experience was magic. It was a magic crew, a magic place. And we together made a magic short.
Yeah, it was very positive. But something that was also cool about that is that was our first time we were strictly hired as directors. We did not write the story, and John did not edit the story. And so it was pretty fascinating going through that editing process because the post-production process was really cool because we had a team we worked with visual effects. We had a team we worked with the editor, who was actually editing from remotely from the UK. We had a team that was doing the color correction, which was really fascinating for John because he learned so much, and then we worked with a sound, a sound editor, and then we worked with a composer. So it was like, I kind of felt like, oh, this is what it feels like to work in other productions where you really aren't wearing all the hats. It was really positive, and the Canadian crew and the Canadian cast was fantastic. A lot of them out of Toronto.
Was that a less stressful process, just not maybe being able to take some of those hats off? Or is it just then it's a different kind of stress because you're trying to communicate your vision to someone else?
I didn't find it stressful. In Canada, they because because we had so little time to shoot. We actually had a much longer pre-production than production. We had to shoot in 4 days, but we were there maybe 11 days before that. So everything was so tight, and you had to kind of get it right going in, and on the day of, you just had to go for it. So in a way, it was sort of, there was no time to be stressed, but we also had great trust in the teams. And working with the DP in particular, he really took time to sit with us before the shoot days and say, "What are you guys thinking? What do you think about this?" He was really generous with his time.
Yeah, I would say luck, in terms of stress, it's like we wake up and we know how lucky we are to make film. It's always fun. You always wake up and you're like, we're making a movie today. So it's kind of like, and then, but we do have 30 shots to get in like 3 hours. So let's get moving. It was really fun. And, it's nice in both situations. You're with a lot of people who all have the same end goal, which is to get the best action and acting down on film. And so I wouldn't say it's stressful. I'd say it's always quite fun.
And the way we work, I'll add too, the way we work is we often work with people. We always work with people we're very familiar with. And many of them sometimes have very little experience, but they're just so right for the role, and they bring something raw to it. But we have the time to work with them usually. And in this case, it really emphasized the importance of great casting, because you have someone, they come in on the day of, they're super prepared, they know their lines, they're willing to be clay if you want to mold their performance differently between each takes. And so that you're really grateful for, that you're just like, oh, we really nailed the casting with this, and they make it easy.
Toby,
both productions.
Yeah, Toby's speaking to, I think, the most important thing that we've learned in the last 2 years, which is productions, bigger productions. They have more toys, they have more people, they have more knowledge, they have more experience. But the only thing that's tricky for any production is time. And even no matter how rich you are, no matter how much money you can pour into it, time is usually the one problem point. And that's something that we didn't realize how gold and how magic our little tiny filmmaking process is, because we have time. And Toby's speaking to the idea of when we want a cop in one of our movies, we go down to town and we talk to the sheriff who we know. And we say, would you be a cop in our movie? And
Right.
He or she's always like, whether it's a cop or someone who works in a store or a taxi driver or whatever, and we just ask whoever's really doing that in our town, they always say yes. And then there's like Toby says, you do need time to get them to relax enough to be who they really are. And so that is, I think, at least for me, the biggest lesson is the beauty of time. But Toby also spoke well about that. The Serbian actors were amazing. So we didn't spend hardly any time, because they talked to us over lunch. They talked to us the night before. They talked to us during castings. When they showed up, nobody said, well, how do you want me to do this? They were magic.
From what I understand, like their filmmaking sort of community or industry has just exploded in size in Serbia,
Yes.
like Eastern Europe generally, but especially in Serbia.
Yeah, Hellraiser had been shot there. We had a lot of our crew had worked on Hellraiser.
Okay.
The makeup, the woman who was the head of the makeup department had done a lot of the makeup and special effects in Hellraiser. She even one day, I think, got to double as one of the characters. So it was pretty neat, including we had a local special effects group called Synergy, and they contributed a lot of the gore, the on-site blood, the kind of shell, the brood case that the Frenchman turns up in, and they had worked on that as well. The whole local crew is busy. They work a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of activity going on in Montenegro, in Albania, in Serbia, Croatia, Hungary, Romania. They're all grabbing that art form and getting busy.
Yeah. Well, they're a beautiful part of the world, isn't it? You can understand. Yes, people might say, well, it's probably a lot cheaper than working in your normal territories, such as North America and the UK. But when you get out there, you've got a beautiful canvas to paint any picture on, because the scenery is just to die for out there.
100%. It is gorgeous.
I'm kind of curious, as we start leading out towards the end here, you two and Lulu and Zelda as well really have become part of the larger horror world now. You've become very much a recognizable name, which is very, again, fascinating, having seen everything you've done from Knucklejack, through the shoot, the hatred, all those things, and watched your style evolve. Now you're here, and you to the point where you, Toby, you appeared in The Fall of the House of Usher.
That was fun.
I bet.
But also because I love the show. Did you guys like the show?
I adored
so
it.
Good.
I adored it because it's my favorite Poe, and it's my favorite film. Even though the series is very different to the original film, it's one of my favorite Poe films as well, the Vincent Price one, because he's just batshit crazy in that. And so I think if you're going to redo it, you had to do it like that. And I thought it was just really clever. For anybody who loves horror films, you kind of knew what was going to happen. If you knew anything about Poe, you just saw the title of each episode. You kind of had an idea what was going to happen to somebody somewhere. And so I just loved it. It blew me away, to be honest.
I'm with you. I mean, it's so clever how he kind of just wove the stories together, and it's just so snappy and and kind of wicked. I loved it. It was such an honor to be a small stitch in that wicked little fabric. Yeah.
Yeah. And an eclectic cast as well. I mean, when you get somebody like Mark Hamill to play completely against type,
who was so good.
Wonderful.
And you kind of think of him as a bit of a shit, but I think by the end of it, you've got a lot of sympathy for his particular character. I think it's the way that show worked. I think because it was so, as you say, so snappy and quick and clever, but there was a big needle of dark humor that ran through every episode as well, where you would laugh at some horrific way somebody had been offed, but it would still make you chuckle. And so pulling those kind of performances out, which I think it was just so well done, and it was weaved together with the sort of overarching storyline. It just worked. For me, it didn't miss a beat. It was brilliant.
With you. And he's such a great guy, Mike Flanagan. He's so supportive of indie filmmakers like us. I mean, he's someone who I think just has incredible, cinema karma, besides being a really smart and creative guy. He's such an angel.
And I don't know that he gets enough credit for the amount of heart he brings to the stuff he does, because obviously everyone talks about the horror, and the horror is stellar. I mean, going right back to was it Absentia, his first film, which is good.
Absentia, then Oculus.
Right, Oculus, right?
Yeah. It's so creepy. Just for a first film, it's stellar. But stuff like Dr. Sleep, I mean, there is such a strong human element in everything he does, like a relatable humanity in everything he does. And I don't know that there's many people in horror right now, and I watch a lot of movies, who are able to combine those things as well as he does.
So well said. Perfect. You're so right, Bren.
And that's why he's so successful, because that heart and that humanity is, that means that the audience, us, relates to the terrible things. And that's what's great about horror,
Definitely. Well, I think that's also the aspect. For me, I think the last couple of years, we've spoke about this, myself and Brennan, quite a lot, really. I've been really surprised by 3 or 4 films over the last couple of years that I just didn't see coming at all, that have kind of really reinvigorated my love for the genre. I'll always love it, but it, as with anything, it peaks and troughs. And obviously when I watch your work, I think, because I've always had that love of weird horror comedy as well, going back to crazy films like Killer Clowns from Outer Space and Young Frankenstein, and some of the weirder stuff that you saw in the 80s especially, and it kind of dropped away, I think. But over the last sort of 5 years, people have started doing it again. And obviously you guys have got a very dark vein that you like to sort of release occasionally in your work. So when you look at something like Deadstream, which I just wasn't expecting at all, and that film just had me laughing from start to finish, even though it's a very strange film and it's basically one man running around a house losing his mind. That's quite interesting how that genre part of the horror seems to be coming back up again, because it seems to have really dropped out of favour until sort of the last couple of years. And you guys are certainly on the cusp of pushing that forward, I think, with the work you do as well.
Well, that's beautiful to be included in that. Thank you. We have our whole family, the four of us, have a very dark sense of humor. And it's like, it can be problematic. Lulu is just talking to me. She's like, Dad, I have one of your traits, and I don't know what to do exactly about it. I'm like, yeah, which trait is that? Because there's a lot that you should have not know what to do. And she says, the trait of laughing at terrible things. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, that you're going to have a hard time losing, because terrible things, for some reason, are funny. And it's not because we're laughing at people's pain or suffering. In a sense, we're more putting a mirror there and laughing at our own pain and suffering. Do you see something terrible and you're like, yeah, this is funny. This is the way I felt in this. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that you're talking about that. We're working on 2 new movies that aren't outrightly funny, but to us, they're probably more funny than Hellhole, because it's darker. It's our dark sense of humor.
Well, there's that old saying, we laugh so that we may not cry. And I think that probably applies to a lot of things.
There you go,
I love the theory of opposites. I do. I mean, yeah.
I mean, this, not to bring this into the conversation, but I do think that this had an effect on me, especially when I had cancer. I had to go through a year of chemo and radiation. And very early on, I didn't have insurance, so I was in a clinic. And when you're in a clinic in America, you sit in a room with 15 to 20 other people. You all do chemo together. You all see the same nurse, because the doctor really only sees you every 3 months, just to make sure you're still alive. They take some notes and then they go off and you're like, hey, but it saved me and I'm alive. But the important thing is my nurse, Kathy, who saved me, said very early on, as she was putting in the chemo needle, she's like, it's really important that you find a way to laugh at all this, because I know that the ones who laugh live. And I was like, well, great. Yeah, exactly. This is hilarious. Let's keep going until I vomit. and it's never gone away,
Got to understand the mission, John.
Yes.
Well, it was quite funny because I know we'd booked this in, but Shudder's doing Horror's Greatest series at the minute. So they're doing this wonderful sort of documentary that they did another one a couple of years ago that was brilliant. And so I just thought it was very apt, because obviously this week's episode is horror comedy. And so it was quite funny that was on Tuesday, which made me laugh. And as you say, some of the things that made me laugh, because they were showing, obviously in North America, it's known as Dead Alive, but over here it's known as Brain Dead, the Peter Jackson film.
Yes.
And some of the people saying the first time they saw that, I mean, I can't remember how it made me feel, other than the fact I was laughing all the way through it, because it's a weird film. And for the climax to be a man killing zombies with a lawnmower and just basically spraying crap everywhere for 20 minutes. But that film's just really weird, from like the zombies having sex on the table to the baby eating somebody's from the inside and all that kind of stuff. And you think, that's 32 years ago, that film. And so it's remarkable how little films, because Peter Jackson was an indie filmmaker, even from small acorns, with someone who just loved making films. It can show you that the horror genre seems to grab hold of people who make films with heart, like you guys are doing. And I think it's such a forgiving genre that we take you in and we just want you to do well and hope you get that mega film that just comes and crosses over massively that occasionally comes round. And so do you think that helps the field you're in, allows you to bear some of your stranger traits to a wider audience in a sort of professional capacity?
100%. Yes. I mean, I got to tell you, like, we started out, well, our intent was to make our first film was meant to be a horror film. So we were drawn to that from the get-go. It was supposed to be a very brutal, dark ghost Western. We just kind of weren't ready to go there. So we were making dramas for a while. But it was hard and not a lot of fun really once it was done. I mean, it was fun making them, but it was hard. They kind of just felt like they sort of floated in the ether when they were done. But once we started making genre films, it was just like, oh my God, someone flipped a switch and we felt like we were part of a family. We felt like our films were seen. We felt like we were seen. And we also realized, oh, this is a great way for us to just kind of exploit our dark weirdness, with a heart. I mean, there's always kind of a great heart and joy behind, I think, our darkness.
Well,
so yeah.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the hatred, because the hatred is really our first horror movie, and it changed our lives. Because what happened was we got into a wonderful festival called Horror Hound, and we drove out to Horror Hound, and suddenly we realized what a beautiful, open-minded community the horror crowd is. And they're open-minded in so many ways. They're open-minded spiritually, they're open-minded emotionally, they're open-minded in all the right places, and especially in art. And that's when we really realized that what we were trying to do with our dramas, we could really do with horror, because you can talk about real subjects like, subjects you don't want to talk about in real time, like cancer. You can take cancer, figure out what the metaphor is for cancer, make a horror movie about it, and then we're all going to talk about it. And suddenly it's a lot of fun because you've poured blood over an interesting subject and made it fun to talk about instead of fucking bummer. You know what I mean? And again, with the humor, we can all laugh about it because we can kill people in fun ways through, so it's just a great way to enjoy making art. And you said it best, Paul, the horror community, they're just so open-minded, they're art savvy.
Yeah.
So you could, some people make movies in the horror community with an iPhone, and we still talk about it as if it was shot with the most expensive Ari in Hollywood. You know what I mean? Like they stand on equal footing, all the art forms, and all of us in the horror community are enjoying those movies, whether they're shot on an iPhone or they're shot by Hollywood for $100 million.
Well, I think that's what's always stood horror, as you refer to there, is it allows people to talk about difficult subjects like serious illness or the disruption of society or poverty in a way that often sort of catches the mainstream off guard, and it allows us to talk about issues that affect us all, or we're all worried about, or we're all concerned about. And we don't shy away from that. And we can it helps us sort of deal with the reality of how shit the world can be sometimes in a fun way, whether it's how people are getting off, or it's how the monster tracks people down, or it's how the film ends. Regardless, it allows people, I think, far more license to turn the camera on themselves and the world around us than it would do if you were working in, say, romantic comedy or drama or something. You're not as stifled by those constraints of that particular genre.
Agreed.
We could keep you here all day talking about horror movies, but we won't do that to you. We'll just say thank you so much for hanging out with us. Obviously, Hellhole is on Shudder, but when can folks expect to see Plastic Smile? I know it played at Fantasia this summer, but I assume it'll be hitting Screambox this year or in the spring.
This October 27th, I think, is our episode's release. And there are 6 others that are really great. But they'll all start in October, the whole series.
Yeah, they're wonderful. We've gotten to see most of them. I think we only haven't seen one. They're really great. It's really fun directors and really fun stories.
And they're going to be in the UK at Grimfest.
Oh, right, yes, in Manchester.
Cool.
I can't remember the date. And then it's going to be in New York City at Brooklyn Horror on October 18th.
Cool.
Very cool. And you mentioned 2 other features, sort of your in-house features that you're working on. Can we expect to see those anytime soon?
Slug and Mother of Flies. This morning,
I love it.
I was naked, covered in blood.
Yep.
And something I won't even tell you what it is because I don't want to ruin the surprise.
Devil's vagina. Did I say that? What happened?
Did.
What just happened?
Sometimes these things just, we can't help it, you know?
Yeah. John, that's not the worst thing anybody's ever said on this program, so you're fine.
Yeah.
Also true. Also true.
Well, okay, we'll try harder next time.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see what you've got coming up with your body of work so far.
Well, thank you.
Thank you both.
It's times like these that encourage us because they keep the joy in the journey. And that's really, what it's all about. We can see from you guys, that's what it's all about. We know that's what it's all about. So thank you so much for, keeping the joy in the journey.
And I hope you'll have us back.
Oh, hey, you are welcome back anytime.
Absolutely. Especially if you decide to make a werewolf film.
Ooh. There's some ones, because we got to make the Frankenstein with Where the Devil Roams. We always loved Frankenstein, and we always were like, man, it would be great to just throw a big kiss towards Frankenstein. We got to do that. I think the thing about werewolves, now I'm cutting into your time, but
hey man,
because we think about that, we talk about that. Werewolves are really interesting, but how do you do it? Like, American Werewolf in London reinvented the werewolf movie and reinvented horror movies for a second there. How do you, and then you got Dog Soldiers that it does a great job with.
Yeah.
So it's, we feel that the only way we could do a werewolf movie is we figure out what we could bring to it that's different, something original. What's the new twist? So we definitely, that one's rattling around in the brain. How could you bring a new twist? I mean, Blackout, Larry Fessenden
I was just about to say Blackout. Blackout was so good. Like a mumblecore horror movie.
There you go.
Really
exactly. And so that's the whole thing is it's like, if something came through our dinner table while we're all having spaghetti, that somebody comes up with the key to open that door, that would be really fun because it's a great concept.
Did you guys see My Animal?
No.
Years ago? Oh, it's really good. So that's I thought a very innovative, cool stab at werewolves. My Animal.
Yeah, Ginger Snaps was like that though, because that kind of came of it, sort of dealing with puberty and menstrual cycles as part of it, which hadn't been sort of included previously, which is why that film is so good.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the whole, it's perfect because the whole like moon, even the word menstruation comes from the root for moon, so that was a really great idea. I wish I'd thought of that.
And again, that's what's cool about the horror crowd is that's why Ginger Snaps is iconic and here to stay. Yeah.
Yeah, very
absolutely.
Much so. Well, there you are then. Then I look forward to me writing credit on that one as well.
All right.
Now you have 2 writing credits that we can put in.
Oh, well, listen, it's been a real joy. Thank you both.
Bye guys.
Welcome back. Thanks again to John Adams and Toby Poser for hanging out with us. Again, you can check out Hellhole. It's on Shudder right now. And you can also check out their other films. They're all really great, going right back to, we mentioned the film Knuckle Jack, which was a really lovely family comedy drama, or comedic family drama, I guess you could say. And you can find all of those on either Shudder, various streaming services, and I believe they're older films like Knuckle Jack, like The Shoot. Those you can rent on Amazon, at least in the US. I had to, when I watched them a couple years ago, I think I had to rent them through a VPN. But you can still, they're available everywhere, and they're really lovely films. Again, the early films very different from what they do now, but equally worth your time. All right, my friend, where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms, apart from one, and all podcast sites as well.
I'm Largely the Truth on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd.
I'd just like to say I am not speaking at this year's Parameet. I'm speaking at next year's Parameet.
Yes, Parameet 2020, September 2025.
Yes, but I will be at Pontefract this year, as I know a couple of people are going and have threatened to buy me a drink. So I suppose I'll have to drink them.
That is so cool. Again, Paul will be at the Parameet in Pontefract. When is that? This month?
October, towards the end. I think it's the weekend before Christmas. No, it's not the weekend before. Well, it is Christmas.
I guess, technically in a larger sense.
serial killers and horror films and pagan rituals, it is Christmas. But it's the weekend before Halloween, I believe.
Yes, perfect. All right. Well, yes, if you're there, keep an eye out for Paul. And if you want to get in touch with Paul, shoot him a message either through ghoststoryguys@gmail.com or mysteriesandmonsters@gmail.com, and he will try and set something up. All right. As always, we like to finish Talk Spooky with a song. And boy, do we have a lot of songs lined up over the next 4 months, as it turns out. But all things in moderation, one song at a time. This time around, we're sharing a track from a Victoria-based band. They are called The Origin. Their latest album, Oubliette, was released on May 30th of this year. And on this episode, we are sharing the second song from that album. It is called How Did We Survive? And you'll find more from The Origin at theoriginmusic.bandcamp.com. You can also find them on Instagram as _origin_band. And of course, if you check the show notes, you'll find links to all their social media, YouTube, and things of that nature. Thanks as always for joining us, folks. We will be back next week with episode 198 with special guest Brandon Scheck-Snyder. And until then, we will leave you with The Origin and How Did We Survive?